So, anyways, I still remember the days when I used to like go and by the way, like this is still the continuation of actually of how I decided to come and actually full on pursue like programming as an actual like choice of leaving my mark on this world and every single day learning something new and building on top of it. It's funny, I just thought of something to post on LinkedIn, but anyways. So I was actually by the end of it, I was getting better at understanding what I have to look for and what I have to understand. By the end of my time in West Africa, I started understanding more what to learn and what are the things that I need to be focused on. And I started realizing that like not having resources directly at your disposal, because I started talking to people and meeting programmers over there, but they're not interested in talking about programming. All of them are they're not interested in programming. All they wanted to do was design websites. Designing websites is the simplest thing. It's not simple, but it's like the most basic of how you can program. The creativity behind designing databases, the creativity behind like where your information goes, how you bring it to the customer, how they interact and they're being stored, and like it's just like layers over layers of like databases and data and processes. For me, that's programming. That's a true interaction with the web, a true interaction with like websites. Remember, what motivated me to start actually learning computer science and like moving into the whole programming world is cryptocurrency and the concept behind cryptography and these kinds of things. So ultimately, all I had to do was just, all I kept doing was dive deeper. And I'd dive deeper and I'd dive deeper because like whatever I'm reading about didn't click. And then I had to dive deeper until the basics, which are like the fundamentals of data and the basic, like types, like the true or false types that programmers use, the if else statements that programmers use, the objects that programmers use, and the way, the methods, the functions, and all these things that programmers use that are the basics of languages and how languages interact. And from there, kind of like evolving into what are APIs and what are databases and how the internet talks to itself and what are the different protocols and the security measures that are taken. It's just like it became a flowy, beautiful experience. But I only started learning those when I actually like left because I was limited on my resources. I remember I used to like take my phone with me, and when there's electricity, man, I'll like plug my computer and like open my phone's like data, like the hotspot, and I would get data on my computer and I would like learn and be taking notes and doing all kinds of stuff, trying to understand what I'm doing. And by the time I actually get at it, like when electricity comes for like an hour, 2 hours, and it cuts off, and then after that, I have like 2 hours of battery before my computer dies. And as my computer's dying, I basically take my notes, and I still maintain my internet and electricity until when it dies. I have to wait for the next day, so I get at maximum like 4 to 6 hours on the computer every day. And keep in mind, I have very much like I don't know, it's like between messages and WhatsApp and Facebook and all kinds of like random shit that you would do online that I normally do online, and just like me randomly researching things that become interesting. It's like a deep rabbit hole, man. When you're entering into any field, because remember it's a field. What I was entering into was like the entire like scene of software, programming, coding, and all that shit. So when you're entering in it, there's a lot of things that are just all over the place and they're not compartmentalized in your mind. They have to kind of be dispatched, separated. And so like I read and I read and I read and I watched and I watched and I watched and I got sucked into all those like they talk about them. There's like the tutorial hell, there's the deep dive hell. There are like basically the loops where you're always like jumping into something and then you're like while doing it you jump into something else, and by the end of it you barely know anything about anything, but you know just a bit of a lot of things that doesn't really like support your mind because you kind of have to go through this loop again and again and again and eventually go like like you as Think about it this way. If we are to look at a bird, well, the first thing you go like, how is the bird flying? And then you look at feathers, and then you look at the wind, and then after you look at the wind, you look at the sky, and after you look at the sky, you look at how the clouds are forming, and then the rain, and then the river, and then the water, and then the bird drinking back from the river, and then the bird flying. So instead of understanding feathers and finishing with the feathers until we understand how they work with the wind and finishing with the wind, until we understand how they work with the clouds and finishing with the clouds, what we're doing is basically we're circling the entire thing. Like we're starting from one point and ending at the same point. Why? Because they're all fucking connected. And that's how, the beauty of like actually established like fields. Like everything in them is connected to everything else. And again, like everything in this world, the entire planet that we live in, everything is collected. I just explained it. It's like clouds, rain, water, sun, everything is basically cyclical. So anything to succeed kind of has to have like a whole, like it feeds into itself, and everyone can jump in at any point and like fill in some form of gap and like support in some kind of way. But the goal is for you not to know what you're doing. And thank God for Richard Feynman. That guy kind of like, that guy got me out of it. And it's funny because like I used to, anytime I get frustrated, I would go watch his interviews. Anytime I'd get frustrated, especially while I was learning programming, I would go watch his interviews. And that guy said something once, like he was telling a story about his father, about how his dad talked about the bird, and he started explaining all the names of all the cultures that they call the bird in Chinese and Japanese and English and Arabic and Aramaic, whatever. But all of these are just, of the bird, but you don't understand anything about the bird itself. And understanding is completely different than like knowing something. And then the deeper you ask questions, the easier it becomes for you to like kind of like delve into things. And like he has a few principles that help me a lot. And he's basically maybe the inspiration why I started this channel. Because the more I'm speaking about these things, the easier it becomes for me to actually express what I'm trying to learn and how I'm trying to learn it. And the depth of how I'm able to explain is the depth of my own knowledge. And again, what I want to do is something that I consider to be very like, I don't consider it to be huge, but I'm not thinking on the course of like, I want to build a business and interact with people. I'm thinking on a platform, on a network, and actually like trying to be able to connect societies in a way to each other. Not in a way, connect societies to each other. Standardize governments, I guess. Uh, Actually place value where people are instead of where like the money is, because I think we generate money, and that's something people have completely like forgotten. But anyways, so like within that, after I actually like realized my resources are limited in Liberia, West Africa, what I did was I basically was like, that's it. And once I realized that my resources were limited, it kind of opened up to how everything around me has kind of been stagnant if it wasn't for my interest in everything, in the things that are programming and computer science and the world that's moving. And then from there, I kind of like, it didn't require courage at that point. It was like very much a clear understanding that I had to leave. And within, I think the day I realized what I wanted to do, within like 3 weeks to like 2 months, I had already kind of like found my way out of the country. And I remember I had a like restaurant that was still open there. My restaurant was still open there, and I left it with the people that I was working with, hoping I would actually like be able to get back after I come and I do some stuff in Lebanon. But it only took a couple of months for them to say that things are not working, business is slow, and I realized that if I go back, I'll just be going back to the same drama. So I stuck it out and I stayed here and I built it. And all in all, now it's been 2 years since I've been back, like literally 2 years and a couple of months that I've been back. And my journey is still not even close, not even close. But it's funny because like when I first came here, the first thing I did was I started searching for like boot camps. And I found one, and I started with the fundamentals of computer science. And with that, I understood more logic, algorithms, and a deeper understanding of functions and how to actually kind of like create, how computers create games or create different paths and passageways with their code, how to be able to understand fully the small cute concepts like recursion, uh, how a function calls itself in order for it to like repeat the activity and then eventually kind of goes like, whoop, we can't do this anymore because like we've reached the threshold. And all of these things are just still for me kind of fascinating how numbers actually, but like ones and zeros, kind of like allow for that thing to happen. And I had to stop myself because I know like if I'm just like if I keep diving, I'll just dive all the way to the beginning of things. But the goal of learning how to program was for me to actually be able to like build my platform. So most of my programming skills should be to initiate the platform and then eventually be able to interact with the people that know how to program. Because that's the one failure I had in Liberia. The people I was working with like did not understand what I was trying to tell them. I couldn't explain it because I myself was lacking. And they only thought about how to program a website and how to actually program a platform. So they wouldn't understand what I was actually requiring from them. It's fun, I guess. And by May 2021, 2022, I started my web development journey and I fully started learning JavaScript and CSS and HTML. And I think at that point over there is when like the realization that I actually have to do some work in programming and not just learn came to me and a bit hard. And I think that's where like the actual boot camp, I could actually explain all the fields about the boot camp. And I wrote like a blog about it, a series of blog posts about it. But for them, I'll leave it to the next video. Thank you guys. Learning definitely is fun, but to actually like to be patient with yourself until you start absorbing that that's something else.